Professor Minford, you just gave a speech here at the Institute, and you said that Brexit would be beneficial for the UK and the EU. Now, this is about contrary to everybody else in the economic world or of the economists. Why would it be beneficial when everybody says it's going to be very, very bad?
Well, I think that a lot of the opinion has been about how terrible border problems would be between the UK and the and the EU. And this is actually all illegal under WTO rules, which is my main point, really, that these costs would be the result of illegal behavior, fundamentally. And so they don't really exist. So a lot of the gloom and doom is about suddenly the UK border with the EU will become a great forest of problems that exporters will have to navigate through. But this is all contrary to WTO rules. This is my main point. And when you put that into evaluations of what will happen, you get a completely different picture from the standard moaning chorus of economists, because they're obsessed by this idea of the border.
But are not tariffs then coming?
That depends on whether there's a deal. But tariffs are avoidable by a deal. So my point is that without tariffs, there's no problems at the border. And we can avoid tariffs by a free trade agreement, which is common sense for both sides.
Another point that you made was that in part of the Brexit decision of the British people was influenced by the fact that there were so many migrants coming from Eastern Europe. But wasn't that a decision that was taken by the British government itself? Because, you know, the EU said you don't have to have freedom of movement of people. It can be postponed, which is what France and Germany did, but not Britain.
No, that's a very fair point. The Blair government let in all people from Eastern Europe straight away, and this was a terrible mistake, and certainly was a contributing factor to the Brexit debate. You know, there's not much more to be said other than that Blair should not have done this, and he was crazy to do it. But he had an agenda. The reason he did it was he thought they would all be Labour voters. And so he thought politically it was a smart thing to do, to get lots of new immigrants into the UK, all of whom would change the demographics of the vote. So this was an irresponsible and foolish thing to do. Of course, what it did was it propelled us out of the EU in one of the factors.
There's another question. You know, you seem to say that it's very easy to do free trade agreements with the rest of the world, and it's going to be all beneficial for Britain. That sounds a bit like, you know, you were dreaming of what the empire was before. So a very, you know, a Britain that can deal with everybody in the world on equal terms or even dominate those. Isn't there some sort of undertone of dreaming of an old world, of the empire in all this?
Not really, not really. And what we're saying is that you know, you could think of unilateral free trade as the result of doing free trade agreements with as many countries as possible. And that means getting rid of barriers so those countries can sell to you. The main gains from free trade come from other countries selling to you at world prices. And this isn't in any way us dominating other countries. It's us saying to them, you're welcome in the UK to sell to us because we want your products at world prices. But that's the strategy.
But is the British market big enough to attract as many exporters? As you know, if you compare it to the rest of the EU, it's comparatively small.
It's a quarter of the whole EU market. You've got to remember that. And actually, our consumers are huge buyers of products from all over the place, which is why everyone wants to sell to them, because they buy a lot of stuff, our consumers. It's quite a big economy, and it's about a quarter of the size. The consumer market in the UK is about a quarter of the size of the whole EU market. So it's not, as I said in my lecture, it's not chicken feed. And this is why the US in particular, very keen to do a free trade agreement with us very soon, because they can see that at last they can get into the EU market, namely the UK. You know, because we would probably buy that chlorinated chicken, you know, which is such a fuss about.
But then it's not going to cross the channel.
No, it'll cross the Atlantic instead. And, you know,
So that's smaller than the channel.
It's very cheap, you know, transport, once you get onto the open high seas, is very cheap. This is the beautiful revolution of the disappearance of transport costs in the last 30 years. And so I think the point is that we will open up our markets to a lot of countries that are very willing to supply them, because it's a big and rich market. And so, you know, they will profit from selling into it, particularly at the beginning when the prices are high. Once the prices drop, they'll probably cool off a bit.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.